This video is brought to you by my wonderful Patreon team. If you want to join a Patreon team, please feel free to click the link down below. And of course, if you don't, that's totally fine. I still hope you enjoyed this video. What sells that fantasy of being a hero in your own story to you as a player? Maybe it's the sheer intensity of a plot, encouraging the player's growth in our hero's journey, collecting power-ups and overall defeating evil. For some, maybe it's the world's immense scale that dwarfs the player in its landscapes, but controlling that player's curiosity and interest to every single nook and cranny that you're able to explore. Everywhere you look in these stories though, there is one vital element that seems to stay and that we always expect. Combat, boss fights, duels. There is something that comes from seeing our characters in combat taking on multiple enemies at a time and overall becoming victorious at the end of the battle no matter how many enemies they throw at you. But what sells that feeling of being a hero? Well, it's the people around you and the enemies. It's how they act and react to every action that you choose to do as a player. For this video, I want to take a little look at the film stunt industry and the ways that it's inspired gaming and the way that it allows us to create our own stories within every single engagement and of course with every single perfect block. When you see these fight scenes, what do you see? Besides all the guns, blood and broken bones, you're seeing stories and problems being created and solved within seconds. Every problem that appears as a challenge is resolved to only reveal the next. For example, in the raid, when we see Rama being dragged across the floor by their leg and then forced to disarm a man using only his legs, to then be able to get his own weapon to use it against three men fighting them in a sword fight, to then being trapped between two different men effectively knocking one man through a door and then creating a weapon and using it against another enemy. Every moment, chapter and framing device, no matter how small that comes up, can truly create a fight scene to be an engaging watch. But also overall showing us the viewer these small moments and puzzles that this hero has to overcome and creating moments of tension that we're able to hold on to until our hero effectively resolves that issue. It's these moments that speak to us as viewers. For example, when Daredevil is fatigued and forced to fight a bunch of guys in a small hallway and thrown against the wall without any energy, we wonder how he's going to break free or what he will do next. Or if John Wick, one of the most deadly and greatest assassins known around, is forced to fight two assassins who he refuses to kill. How is he going to use the tools around him and how is he going to not give in to his impulses to kill these people? Or maybe it's Batman being forced with a situation where a man armed with a grenade is in such a small space. How's he going to overcome this and how's he going to remove said guy from the room? Say what you will about Batman v Superman, but this warehouse scene is so engaging and is almost a perfect fight scene for Batman. It's so great you can honestly break it up into 4 story parts alone. From the beginning of disarming the guards to part 2 of Batman losing his gadgets, forcing him to get closer to the danger, and then falling victim to the flaws of his cape and his outfit, and then overall being stabbed and then at the end succeeding and beating everyone in the warehouse. Every single chapter of this fight scene is broken apart so perfectly but blends so well to tell one incredible fight scene story. Every great and iconic fight scene is fully directed and controlled by these micro stories. But of course our characters are just actors behind a mask. It's from the stunt team to the directors to the camera team which sell this fantasy to you and which make you root for these heroes. It helps to have impeccable blocking in frame to let the audience be able to perfectly read each story. A great example is of course still in that Daredevil fight scene. We're able to see so many actors do so many different roles on one single shot. The director and the camera team always made sure you was able to keep your eyes on this one bad guy slowly getting back up. And over time crafting a story with his actions to have a beginning, middle and overall an end. And the problem that he brings in the placement of this shot. Now that's what I call a perfect block. But how does this translate into gaming? The gaming industry has been and will always be inspired by what people see on the silver screen. Every developer, new or old, has seen a film icon or character that has inspired them to create the games that we love. And this is no different to how we direct and see combat in video games. In gaming, it's important to have these micro narratives in every moment of engagement, whether you're talking about running out of ammo and having to get your hands dirty, or simply pressing a right or left button to defeat a stickman with a cool kung fu style. Gaming mimics what we love from the best moments of any fighting scene of any movie, because movies have been selling that fantasy for us for years, so why change the formula now? Something I hear a lot and a lot of people will endlessly joke about is how in video games, isn't it nice when villains take their turn to hit the player? But what if you play the game and they didn't take their turn? What if they all hit you at once? It becomes frustrating and instantly breaking that illusion of being the hero that we expect to see from these types of games. But also, if you watch any fight scene closely in a movie, it's all about timing and waiting. Any stuntman or woman will act and pretend to be moving, but realistically all they're waiting for is their mark to act and react accordingly to sell the move and the fight scene to the audience. So of course, if I'm talking about combat in video games, then I have to talk about the franchise that made hand-to-hand combat a gaming staple that it is today, the Batman Arkham series. Rocksteady understood what we wanted to see from the Batman, but most importantly, they understood how the combat should feel. But before we jump into that, I want to take a look at a combat system that, despite trying to sell the illusion of combat and feeling like a cool hero, it still fails on its biggest stance, and that's problem solving and storytelling. I'm talking about Assassin's Creed 1 to Assassin's Creed Revelations, but for this video we're just going to talk about Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. The identity of Assassin's Creed focused a lot around the style that came from the combat. Despite the combat not being very deep, it made up for it in its variety of animations, and the fans loved it, including myself. But what held this back was the slow waiting game that came with just waiting for that counter system to come up from the first two games. So to try and create a smoother and faster combat system while retaining that slick animation style, Ubisoft introduced the chain kill system in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Once the player perfectly blocked an attack, they would be granted the ability to be able to pull off any animations until they are hit. Can you see the flaw with this system? As I mentioned, any good combat situation will be full of stories, but what essentially Ubisoft did here was create two stories or two problems that the player must solve during combat. Problem 1, how to deal with these large groups of enemies in the first place, which overall is always going to be the first problem of a fight scene. But then problem 2 is blocking the enemy at the right time, starting the chain animation, and then the rest is history. Sure, they will provide you with the great sense of being an assassin and being able to press a button as quick as possible to pull off great choreographed takedowns, but overall remove that important storytelling device that comes from any great engaging combat system. And before you bring up the fact that they throw different enemy types at you to make sure you can't insta-kill them, the problem with a lot of Assassin's Creed games, especially the first 4, is that you can find yourself using the hidden blade to take down an enemy instantly without that same challenge that they should have brought to the table. So with that being said, now let's jump into the Arkham series. The Arkham franchise has of course been criticised for its press 2 buttons to win gameplay, but there is something way deeper than just that. In every scenario there are situations and solutions that are forced onto the player, and Batman testing their skills in timing and multitasking. Whenever you're stuck in a mosh pit of punching kicks, the player must counter every attack that comes their way. Some enemies you must counter multiple times to be able to disarm, some enemies you have to stun before even being able to attack them, and even others you have to jump behind them to remove a taser. There is a reason this combat system is used in so many games that we see today. It's because it allows for these micro situations in combat to come up time and time again and not feel old. And that really does replicate the small solutions and problem solving situations that we see in any great film's combat. And on top of all that, the Arkham franchise is known for its variables in so many incredible animations that let the players see their quick thinking paid off with an incredibly crafted and animated counter to any situation. Whether you're talking about jumping off a wall or breaking a man's leg, there is variety that this creates and ensures that the player is never left without a solution or a choice to solve these problems and micro stories that come up. And every single choice you could offer a player is very important to create an incredible combat system. 2015's Mad Max saw the player explore and tackle the challenges a universe such as Mad Max should offer. You tackle storms, convoys of trucks, sniper rifles and fire-breathing cannons, just to name a few. Every challenge can create interesting slices of stories for the player, and overall making the world's hazards an impactful side effect to the expectations of this iconic franchise. Situations like when I was looking for loot and being ambushed by two bandits, one who could counter my attacks and the other being a basic enemy. In this game, the combat has a great sense of weight that comes with every single interaction and takedown that Max is able to do. But what really helped this small moment stand out is I was also avoiding sniper rifle fire at the time. So this became a small game of green light, red light in combat, testing my attention to detail and timing to be able to succeed and win overall. The tension that this game is able to bring to the table when you're boxed in by enemies at every corner, it can leave you in small moments of unprepared shock and often makes sure that you're on top of your game to be able to make it through victorious. I was left in an intense situation where I had no healing items or a single shot in my shotgun to be able to guarantee a kill. Then the game threw goons at me armed with heavy weapons that I can counter and use against them, but also shielded enemies who I had to use a special skill to be able to break it during combat, and then of course guards that are able to tackle you to the ground, and even the drummers that will call on the hordes of enemies to attack you in the arena.
There's a rule. You don't kill the war crier. Not sure if you're aware.
There are so many incredible variables and problems that you have to deal with during combat, much like the Arkham games perfected. But Max isn't Batman, and has to survive in this destroyed world apocalypse. And with that adds an entirely different layer to the situations you find yourself in within combat. Whether you're choosing to use your shotgun to guarantee a kill but in turn leaving you without a shell that you might need to solve a puzzle within the world, or quickly using a shiv to be able to take down a tougher enemy on the ground but overall realising it's only a one-time use, or every time you take damage and being forced to heal, whether you're finding food in the world or using the water in your canteen, there are resources in this world that are so scarce and they don't come out of nowhere, so every time you're choosing to use one of these items it really does feel like a matter of life or death. So with every combat engagement that this game offers to you also comes an item management and usage situation. Of course it's only brief, but it's those aggressive and small moments that Avalanche really created to sell this universe of Mad Max to you, making every fight and situation and choice seem important no matter how deep or even shallow the engagement may really be. But being able to see your character take a beating and being kicked to the ground, but ultimately getting back up is a very huge and important part of telling a good story within a fight scene. If you become an untouchable killer, then that fantasy becomes unchallenged. But seeing your character take that beating and being faced with too many problems to solve becomes a big reason for us to root for these heroes in a good fight. Because we need to put a little bit of elbow grease and act accordingly to be able to defeat whatever the opposition throws at you. But honestly, combat isn't just about the hero. There's one very big and important formula that comes with a combat fantasy, and that's the people and team around you. The stunt teams that record and react to every punch to the face, or the devs who grew up wanting to be able to craft their perfect fight scene fantasy. Earlier I said gaming will always be inspired by the actions that we see in films, and that stands with actions and reactions of enemies around you. Perfect cinematography and choreographed attacks can hold up very well on an incredibly shot fight scene with fantastic blocking of each character on stage, but video games allow us to control the cameras ourselves, so with that comes an entirely new way that we have to choreograph and be able to tell when an enemy is about to attack and what micro stories are about to be told. So many companies painstakingly make sure they motion capture and animate various amounts of reactions to sell that feeling of success to you. From interactions of sliding off walls or holding a bullet wound or simply exaggerating their wind-ups and attacks. And we're always going to be inspired by films and television, and it's incredible to see that despite gaming being a very different medium, we're still able to see the same techniques that brought so many great icons to life and see these same techniques used in our own stories so we can finally feel like these heroes too. So next time you're playing a game and you're in a fight scene, take a moment and focus on the reactions and stories being told around you as you're in that moment of engagement, and maybe you'll be able to see how directors and video game developers have been able to sell that dream to you by making sure you pull off that perfect plot. Hi, this has been a subject that I've been thinking about for a while. Of course, as you can imagine, this is very inspired by what Corridor Digital have been doing with the Stuntmen React, and I've sort of been listening to the stories and what they talk about, and it's really engaging to see how it's changed with obviously gaming being so different from film, but at the same time you're able to see the small inspirations and the fantasies that we as nerds and people who enjoy films want to create in a game and actually be able to have us as the player feel like, and I just thought it was quite an interesting topic, and I hope people enjoyed this video. Of course, if you did, why not leave a like and subscribe for more videos like this every single Thursday, and I will, of course, see you at the next checkpoints. Goodbye.